Welcome to season 3 of Phoenix Vision. It's great to be back after a little break, and it's been a bit of a wild personal ride for myself, and I will unpack that in a further podcast. But for now, I couldn't think of a better person to kick off this new season 3 than the wonderful Charlie Martin, who is a somatic coach working to help her clients reconnect and connect with their bodies through her business Pantiera Healing. So thank you so much for coming on, Charlie.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be here and be diving into this with you.
Me too. I've been wanting to record this podcast for like quite a while actually, because we've done a couple of sessions in terms of your fantastic coaching, and each session has been absolutely mind blowing and completely transformational. And like each one has actually started a cascade of life changes for the better, and it's just freaking powerful, powerful stuff. So
Yeah, I remember I think after the first session we had a few weeks later, you were like, Charlie, what is this?
yeah, I remember I was just like, "You're a witch! Oh my God, what have you done?" And like it was. I won't dive into exactly what happened, but it basically triggered off a series of pivotal decisions that I had to make that ultimately were like put me in a much better position than I was in. So yeah, like thank you for that and helping me realize certain things through that session. So yeah, like that's why I've been so excited to unpack this for quite a while, because like it's so damn powerful. And yeah, I'm sure like there's many of the listeners can benefit from finding out more about somatics, and so this can potentially be a nice gateway for people to do that. So yeah, but before we dive into somatic coaching and healing, I'd love to just kick off by asking you a little bit about your journey. So yeah, what led you into supporting others in their healing journeys? Because I often find that there's always a story with health and wellness practitioners doing what they're doing. So I would love to ask what yours is, please.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So many ways to tell this story, but recently I've realized that not everyone likes to dive into their pain. And this has been kind of a new thing that I've realized that like from a young age, I was looking at what was going on. I was looking at the pain, trying to figure out like how to make it into something juicy. So like after kind of a few teenage years of being very emotional, very sulky, my emotions actually were like so intense at times that I was like, oh, this is too much to handle. what what do I do basically? There are times, I mean, I was a bit of a drama queen, and there were times where I was feeling so strongly in my body that I was like, I think I'm gonna die. Like I'm so and so I think over time that led me to try and understand how to move these emotions, these energies in my body. And so I started doing that for myself. There was no one kind of around for me to really rely on in terms of like being able to make myself feel better in my body and my emotions. And so I kind of just started relying on myself, started reading personal development books, started kind of getting into Buddhism and things like that, just as a way to yeah, to understand a bit what was going on in my body. And eventually started supporting my family, my mum kind of primarily. And eventually I realized that what I was doing with her was kind of like somatic coaching, without realizing that that's what I was doing. So when I found out that that was a thing, kind of like embodiment, working with the body and mind, the connection between the two, that was a huge, beautiful revelation for me. I started doing the training, and it's really changed my life and has sort of helped me to continue dive into the journey with myself. Yeah.
Mm. Beautiful. Thanks for sharing, and big ups Charlie's mum. Boom. Yeah, because I understand that like like working with her was like really pivotal to opening up and having this deeper understanding of self. So
Yeah,
yeah.
100%. And I in a way I believe that, we come with particular parents in particular situations for a reason. Like we choose it in a way. And so I definitely know that I chose to be my mother's daughter, and our journeys have been super interlinked. So in a way she's healed lots of things, I've healed lots of things, and together we're sort of like walking this path together.
Oh, that's beautiful. Beautiful. So fantastic stuff. So yeah, I'd love to ask Charlie, what is somatic coaching or somatics broadly,
Yeah.
and how does it help people heal?
So, soma means the body in Greek. So, somatic is to do with the body, and there's lots of different ways that you can talk about somatics. Somatic coaching specifically is a type of coaching that is body oriented. So, instead of looking at just the mind, and often in coaching, it can be, for example, we set a goal and we try and figure out how to get there. With somatic coaching, it's involving the body and what's going on. So in our world, we've basically been very disconnected between the mind and the body. And the idea of somatic coaching is to try and look at all of the parts, include everything, um, as a way to move forward, not looking simply at the mind and what's going on at that level, but looking also at the body wisdom, which I believe the body is super, super wise. If we listen to the body, we can tune into a lot of truths that I think our minds aren't quite able to see or to be aware of. Um, and I found it really beautiful personally on my own journey.
Yeah, no, it's great because I think like so much of coaching in general operates from the mental sphere, and there's nothing wrong with that, and it's very much needed because the mind creates endless challenges for us, and it's so good to understand the loops of the mind and how the mind is orientating itself. But there's so much more information that we can potentially have access through the body. And I think there's a saying that goes along the lines of if you're trying to solve the problems of the mind from the level of the mind, you're gonna either be limited or come into challenges. Or some people would say that it's very actually difficult to solve problems from that level, whereby dropping into the body can often yield different results and open different things up. And I know I can speak from my own experience how much actually this coaching approach when I was able to actually get into the body, just even like a little bit of listening then went on to trigger like a huge, I'm thinking primarily of like the last session that we had and how it actually led on to actually triggering a huge process. um, and it was almost as if there was so much feeling and so much of a well there, just like a dam which just wanted to collapse, and it was like that session was like a gateway for that to happen. So how can you yeah, I mean, I've given a bit of a preamble there, but how can you kind of like describe somatic coaching and its difference to more like say like conventional coaching?
Yeah, so I say one of the main pillars of somatic coaching is having embodied conversations. So you're having a conversation, and you're including the sensations in the conversation. So often I will guide my clients back to talking about what's going on in terms of the body. So I will ask, what's happening here? And they might say, oh, well, my heart feels heavy, or oh, well, my belly feels a certain way. And by helping them to tune into that sensation and describe what's going on, we often will tune into like a different part of the self. Um, Quite often I do find this has to do with kind of maybe inner child that's present, but it doesn't have to be inner child. Sometimes there's other parts of the self that are kind of not included in kind of the mind chatter. And so when we include, like, for example, okay, my heart feels heavy, and from that place, we're able to I suppose have a broader conversation about like what's really going on in the present moment, because the mind can very easily go into past and so start making up stories about, oh well, I feel bad because this happened with my dad and this happened with da 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 da. And then we can go into the future where we get into more anxiety and different things, and actually going into the sensations helps us to be like here now and kind of dealing with what's present right in the moment. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. And kind of what comes up for me is kind of like the language of the body and also the language of the emotions can often be very difficult to articulate into the language of the mind because it's like a different dialect. It's like speaking Norwegian, especially if you're not kind of acquainted with the language of the body and the language of the emotions. So
Mm.
they say that emotions are quote unquote illogical, but I would disagree with that. They follow their own logic, which doesn't always make sense to the logical mind orientated way of being and thinking.
Mm.
So yeah, what could you say around like this kind of communication with the body, communication with the emotions, whereby it may not be our first language, say, until we can like develop that, like, and yeah, what can you say about say like opening those channels of communication with these other parts of self, sometimes deeper parts of self, but these other aspects to us that we may not be so acquainted with, and also I would love to also bring inner child in there as well because we are generally speaking as a society, I believe, not so connected to our inner children as maybe we could be to be in a beneficial place. So does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. So, one interesting thing that I've been finding with people is a lot of people are scared to go into the emotions, especially when it's kind of heavier emotions like maybe sadness, maybe grief. There's a lot of fear around going into it because I think a lot of people get scared that once they go into it, like it like they're going to keep going down essentially. I get a lot of people, and I have that. I've had that myself in the past, like getting scared that I'm going to get stuck in the emotion, and that it's just once I go into it, I'll be in there forever. And what I've been finding with somatic coaching is like within a contained space, what happens is those emotions they switch really easily. So essentially, it's switch isn't the right word. They shift really quickly, much quicker than people expect them to. So what happens is actually a lot of the time these particular emotions in the body, what they want is to be witnessed, and that's one of the main things that I encourage people to do is to become the witness of the emotions, but that we can do by ourselves, really. And I think it's incredibly powerful. It's the most powerful thing we can learn how to do. Have these conversations with ourselves, start to witness what's going on in the body, and then those emotions or sensations they will shift really really quickly, and then that can create transformation. Whereas if we're ignoring them, what happens is like they're still there, they're getting worse, and they're coming out sideways. So they might come out for for some people, for example, they can come out at others, like they can come out at our loved ones in maybe anger or resentment or just different things. So if we're not including those parts, they're still talking to us and they're still talking through us, but we just don't have as much control over them.
Mm. Yeah, that puts me in mind of like the kettle that's kind of boiling over. It's kind of like we have like all of these emotions that we're maybe not practiced with expressing in a more healthy way. So it's just like the kettle's boiling over, and then the suppressed emotions might come out like an angry outburst towards our partner or our kids or something like that. And also want to kind of ask a little bit more about the people's reticence to go into the emotions because they feel that it's like there's so much there. Because I have found this in my practice as well, and I think this can be for many reasons. But what I find is that people tend to they sometimes what people will say around that is that they don't want to lose control,
Mm.
and that can sometimes be a reason to actually kind of try and hold them together. So yeah, what could do you find something similar, or do you find that there are other factors that feed into why people may may not feel comfortable to fully express their emotions?
Well, I feel like it's kind of like what you said earlier, is this is another language almost. This is something that we need to learn and be taught, and we haven't. So I think it makes sense that people aren't able to go into these emotions because we haven't been taught how to hold ourselves in a way that's safe and that feels good, and to remember that yeah, we're okay and this is normal. And because we're not taught that this is normal, people get scared that like, oh, this feels uncomfortable. Maybe this isn't normal. I'm not okay. I'm not, and so it's just about I think just switching the perspective. And it's quite, I think it's quite easy actually. It's a small step once it's learned and once we were able to kind of see that actually feeling the emotions feels good, because most people that I speak to, once they go into it and they let themselves feel the sadness, have the tears, feel the anger, whatever it is, it feels so much better. So I think it's actually really not that hard. We just need to learn how to do it.
Fantastic, fantastic. This is a really nice lead in actually to the next question I want to ask actually. So I could see a massive potential application for somatic coaching can be to help with a huge problem that I see as being really widespread, which is people being disassociated from their bodies, often due to some sort of trauma, but not always, in my understanding. So I want to ask a question a little bit about disassociation. Um, First off, like how would you describe disassociating from the body, and how and why do people disassociate from the body, and also how can they potentially reconnect if they notice that there is an element of disassociation happening, which I think most people have. Like, I've definitely had that myself, like for sure.
Mhm.
So yeah, like what could you share on disassociation, please, Charlie?
So this is the part where I get a little bit nerdy. So stay with me, okay?
We love nerdiness.
Great.
Yeah.
So this, I believe this dates back to around 15th century, could be before, but essentially, if you think about the Enlightenment period, around the Enlightenment period, there was this belief that the rational mind was the most important part of self. So I don't know if you've ever heard the saying by Descartes, which basically says, "I think, therefore I am," and it was this whole like rationalism thinking that essentially put the mind as the number one thing. And around this time, we were also speaking about, I guess, a disconnection between like humans and nature. And I think those things are really connected. So at that time, the mind was kind of seen as like more of the humans' intelligence. And then on the other side, the body was more like the kind of more primitive, animalistic, and more like nature. And so there was a disconnect that started to be created there and then. And so this, I think, has led into a society today where we've put the mind as like the number one thing for people to think about, and then the body is completely second. And it's created a huge disconnect, leading to people being, as you said, disassociated. So being disassociated means most people that I speak to aren't able to even go into the sensations. I mean, unless they are asked to, and even if they are asked to, sometimes they're unable to. But most people just don't generally just ignore that part of themselves. And it's not until you do ask them, they're like, oh yeah, let me think about that. Okay, yeah, what does it feel like in my body right now? So um I guess this association means that they're not including the sensations, the body, almost like even if you want to think about it as like the animal side of ourselves, that's not being included in our lives. So, when you think about like maybe being back at school and you had to sit still, be quiet, raise your hand if you needed to go to the bathroom, and you had to be in one place for the entire day. And so a lot of our needs were like being put to the side. If you needed to just go and uh uh walk around, especially like I know, Jess, that you've got ADHD, ADD, possibly. So do I. And so, like there's this kind of the side of ourselves that like didn't want to stay sitting still in a chair, but we had to because otherwise we'd get told off, right? And so uh yeah, I really believe this is like leading or going back to 15th century. And so there's a whole societal thing that needs to be changed around that. And it's going to take some time, but I definitely think it starts with the individual changing their own perspective, and allowing themselves to, like in a setting like a classroom setting, for example. So I've done a lot of somatic learning, where we're the number one thing that they say when we start the Zoom call, say, and we're going to be on Zoom for the whole day, it's like, by the way, if you need to get up to go to the bathroom, just go do it. If you need to walk around, if you need to, you know, cook some food while we're learning or whatever it is, that's fine. That's welcome, because you're human, you're a body. You're not just like a mind that's able to sit at your laptop for 8 hours a day and just do your work. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a beautiful riff, and I wasn't expecting the opener. So, like, well, back in the 15th century, it's like fire, fire, boom, boom. And what I guess what was coming up for me when you were talking about this kind of like this kind of glorification of the mind, and kind of like pedestaling of the mind, and you get these like sayings such as higher mind, and I think our Western society is very much geared towards really valuing and prizing the thinking function,
Hmm.
whilst very much neglecting the feeling function,
Mm.
or, or even kind of struggling for the word, um, devaluing the feeling function, and yeah, in many cases, um, demonize well, some cases demonizing the feeling function, and
Mm.
like Carl Jung very much like looked at the feeling and thinking as being completely juxtaposed functions of the human psyche. So if we're lodged just in one polarity, we're inherently very, very limited. And I think like as a society, we found ourselves in this thinking paradigm, which is potentially creating a lot of problems for people. And we're talking about this being the potential root of the disassociation, this one-sided way of looking at things, and
Mhm.
it also makes me think of the polarity of the masculine and feminine, and kind of like looking at what's happening within our society in terms of an over polarization towards the masculine, which we can see in terms of the destruction of nature, the greed of capitalism, like patriarchy, colonialism. So thankfully, we're in a time of shift, and to go further from to like further into that, we could maybe look at the somatic. Would you agree with the somatic coaching being very much lodged in the feminine polarity over the masculine? And what could you say around, how this ties into that little riff about society and polarization?
Yeah, so yeah, just remembering, by the way, that those words, those terms like feminine, masculine, it is just like an archetype thing. It's a vocabulary that we use to describe things that aren't really describable and that are like intangible. So, there's this you could also call it so many different things, the yin yang, the Shiva Shakti, this kind of like energy versus structure. Yeah, so just to kind of say that, because I think for some people, like, hearing kind of it might discourage them from going into somatic coaching, because they're like, oh, I don't really want to go too much into the feminine, or yes, I just wanted to say that. And I think what you're saying around, let's see, I want to bring in this idea that somatic coaching, I believe, is rooted more in kind of indigenous practices. Um, so versus kind of more I suppose Western ways of looking at mental health might be more for example psychology and different psychologies that involve mostly the mind, and then when we look at more indigenous ways of thinking, they always include the body as well. And so in terms of that, like, all of this is very, very linked. So when I was speaking about 15th century rationalization, separation of humans and nature, there was also this separation of nature and culture, and of like indigenous people versus civilized people. And so there was almost this kind of I think this is the way that I see it, and I've kind of done a little bit of research around this, but still more needs to be done. Always more can be done, but from what I've seen, there's it's almost a way of let's see, justifying, that's the word I'm looking for. It's a way of justifying colonization. So, if we think that the mind is more important and the colonized human, in the way that Western people were seeing it, is better, then on the other hand, nature and the destruction of nature, which started around really started around the 15th century. There was kind of a huge um, upburst of going into different lands and really destroying the nature, pillaging everything, taking all the resources, looking for the gold, this kind of thing. So it was kind of a way of justifying that. The colonizers were like, okay, we're better, our minds are more developed, and so we can go into these other lands, go and colonize these people, destroy their lands, take their resources, because there's it's almost like a superiority, like a moral superiority, because we're developed. And I'm trying to remember what your question was, Jess. I'm somewhere in the ballpark of answering it, I think.
I'm actually just going to continue on the tangent we're on because this is juicy. This is really, really juicy, and I find it interesting you say civilized because it's just like I would say like quote unquote civilized
Yeah,
because okay they may be more technologically advanced but you go in and causing like so much harm to other cultures and the land. I mean, like how civilized is that? And I find
right,
it so fascinating that actually the conversation is going in this direction because we really get into the nut of the etiology of why people become disassociated, and it sounds as though this like kind of like colonial mindset is like it's kind of insidiously fed so far into our culture, and and from the cultural level feeding down to the individual level. So and like recognize this within myself as well because
mm,
we live in a colonialized thinking orientated culture, so it's been a work for myself to kind of see the programming within me and kind of like unpick things and think in different ways. And I think it's such a conditioning that we're so in that it's so hard to see it because we're so in it. But I'm seeing like a really strong and beautiful trend at the moment in terms of this coming a lot more to the fork. And so yeah, I mean, what could you share around like colonialism and some of the challenges that that mindset can potentially create within the body? Because I know we've spoken quite a few times around how the individual has to almost like pick up the slack for what the
mm,
culture is creating within them in terms of programming that ultimately creates problems for us on the mental, emotional, physical level. Health as well then stems into that. Um, and also, I feel like I've kind of gone around the houses a little bit with this question, so maybe feel the need to kind of like simplify and clarify because I know what I'm talking about,
mm.
but the viewers might be a little bit confused after that riff. So, would you be able to kind of simplify what I've just brought up, and then kind of be able to like go into your thoughts around it, please, Charlie?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So, yeah, I think in a way, what you're asking is how have we been colonized? How are we carrying the colonizer mindset inside of ourselves, right? And what does that look like? And what do we need to change in order to start questioning this societal colonizer thinking that is still really present within our society? Is that about right?
Yes, thank you. Bang on.
Great. So yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up because, as much as we're speaking on a more global level and now I'm brought in like historical facts and stories in a way as well, because it's a story, a way of thinking about the world and what's happened in history. Um but it's, bringing it back to present day right now in our bodies. What does colonization still look like? And it looks like, what you could call like hyper masculinization. So being this like, okay, the masculine is super important. We're being forced or forcing ourselves actually to like work for hours on end, and this kind of like hustle culture. This is really like the baby essentially of colonization is it's become hustle culture. And so when you're bringing it back to yourself in ways in which you're seeing the colonizer inside yourself, I love that you're bringing that in, because that's how we start to change things. That's how we start to create yeah, just change in our society, is through noticing, oh, right, I'm not listening to my own needs right now. Uh I'm forcing myself to get up at 6 a.m. because that's what I think is good for me, and then get to the gym because that's what I think would be the best thing. By the way, those can be really, really good things. I'm not saying it's bad to get up at 6 and go to the gym. If you do that, good on you. I guess it's just about listening to what your body is needing. And sometimes our body needs rest. And rest has been a huge thing that has been, um, I think, kind of like, I don't know if denigrated is the right word, but, just kind of seen as something that's not important, that's not productive also. So this huge like desire to be super productive, to have the best outcome possible. That's that this colonization continued in ourselves, because if you think about how what happened historically was, they, as I said, they around the same time that they were going to different uh countries and colonizing them, there was also the start of the Industrial Revolution, which was like productivity, productivity, productivity. That's where all of that started. So yeah, when it comes to ourselves, I think we can start to prioritize what we need, prioritize rest, prioritize need for love, need for, having more like loving relationships, rather than going to work and putting that as the most important thing in our lives. And I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add to that, especially kind of with your personal experience, Jess.
Yeah, no, thanks for asking. Yeah, I mean, what's coming up there is I can see how this can trace straight back to the dissociation, because I really love what you shared around the kind of hustle and grind culture that we're in, especially in a place like London where we are located at the moment. And how this is like the baby of colonialism. That's really interesting. And yeah, I mean, I can talk from the health perspective, and from what's happening within the body when we're in this hustle and grind culture. It tends to put us into, when we're in do grind, 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 must produce, must work, must do this and do that, and have multiple things happening in multiple areas. This is categorically putting the system, the body, into a fight or flight state.
Mm.
So, fight or flight state, excess cortisol, the system is running on stress hormones essentially. And they asked a number of doctors, 100 doctors, like, what's the biggest killer of people, and they pretty much unanimously said stress.
Mm.
So now, when we are in stress because of our perception and how we're living our lives, so it's numerous things can cause stress, but usually it's based in past trauma or inherited ways of thinking, such as, yeah, this if our parents have been in this hustle and grind kind of paradigm, the likelihood is we're going to be in that as well. And we're in a working culture whereby it's not serving. It's not serving at all. And there's so many people who are burned out and miserable and having a tough time. And if cortisol is too prevalent in the body for too long a period of time, the health problems around the corner, the pain problems around the corner, and we can actually look at the pain as a corrective factor. We call it the pain teacher, because
Mm.
if you live long enough out of alignment or within stress, this is going to create a problem. It's going to create pain, and the pain is often a gift from the body to say, "Hey, what you're doing is creating problems, and if you continue to do these things, it's going to create more problems for you." Because we can't live in a way that's out of alignment. Our natural state is not to be in stress, but this it feeds into, you know, the cultural, especially the working culture paradigm, is feeding into this way of being stressed all the time. Do go go go. And to round this little riff off, when we're in stress, when we're a fight or flight, we are lodged into the thinking
Mhm.
over the feeling.
Yeah.
When we're in stress, it creates a mind frame whereby we are constantly looking for the tiger, or looking to like solve the problems that we're in, and we get lodged into this thinking way of being, because this is how the brain and body operates. Because like we only see what's in front of us, and we're not able to see the creative solutions that come from being rested, and in say the right brain.
Yeah.
We're not able to see the creative solutions, and so then this stress paradigm lodging us into the thinking can very easily lead to dissociation, because we're continually, habitually cutting off the feeling to think, because we're constantly in stress because of the societal paradigm that we're in.
Yeah, I love that you just brought in first of all, grounding it back into like slightly more quote unquote scientific terms, talking about, what's happening in the body with the cortisol coming in. And secondly, talking about I just lost my train of thought. That was so ADD of me. And then Gosh, what were you just saying? The creative minds. So in Buddhism, they there's sort of this opposition between the kind of thinking mind and the creative mind. And I think that it is really helpful to think about this I suppose more feminine aspects that we're bringing in, not just as the body, but actually also as the creative mind. That's something that we can only access when we're in a relaxed state, right? As you just said. And so you've just said it, and I'm just drilling that point in. That's super and super important to think about. Yeah, a more relaxed mind as a creative mind, and as a mind that's going to be able to tune into pleasure more, to tune into also like just different solutions and a way of thinking and living that's just going to be way more beneficial for us. Because fight or flight is supposed to be for very short periods of time, and we're supposed to be, as you said, regulating ourselves so that we're, for example, supposed to be in fight or flight for the time where we're being chased by a tiger, and then shake it off, get out of the cortisol, whatever hormones have been created in the body whilst we're being chased by that tiger. Um, and then going back to being in a more relaxed state. But what's happening at the moment is we're just constantly, receiving those signals that we're in danger, even if it's just like receiving an email from our boss saying that, whatever, we've done something wrong, and then we're just chronically being in stress, and it's really, really creating a lot of issues. um and I noticed it myself as well. Like I was kind of, before I started really getting into the somatic coaching, was just living a life that was constantly like super, super fast. The amount of information that we receive, whether it's phones, computers, like all of the input that's coming in, that's creating stress on our bodies. We're not meant for that naturally. The pace of things, everything is so, so fast. Even just like time, and like time is a construct, and we've created that. And I could talk a lot about time, but I'll make it short that, the fact that we're constantly worried about being late and chasing the next thing. It's just like it's such a quick environment, especially if we're living in cities. And so just reminding ourselves that this is not a normal state to be in, and we should be able to regulate back into a relaxed state. And that's actually a lot of what I teach people, is to learn to notice when they're in fight or flight, and instead of continuing to be in fight or flight, actually regulate and come back. And we regulate through breath, we can regulate through a lot of different things, but essentially just bringing the nervous system back to a state of relaxation. And just to say really, really quickly, that can also go the other way. So once we're too much in the fight or flight, so that would be kind of the kind of say this is up here, like this is fight or flight in the higher version of it, if that makes sense. Then we come back down into a more relaxed state, and then it can also go into kind of shutdown, which is another fight or flight response.
Mm. Yeah, interesting, interesting. Um, Makes me think when you're talking about the time there around. I never actually watched this, but I know a few years ago there was a TV show called 24, and it was basically about this guy who has like every episode was like a real time hour in this guy's life, and it was, he had to, like, I don't know, just defuse a bomb within a day, get solve the riddle within a day, otherwise, something really bad would happen. And yeah, just thinking about like this show that basically is all about time pressure,
Mm.
and people are watching that, and I guess like going into a space of just like this facilitating more of this like yeah, this fight flight race against the clock kind of mentality. And I'm not saying the societal everyone being in a rush is because of 24, but it's one of the many ways in which society is feeding in these ideas that aren't help like necessarily the most helpful thing for the individual.
Yeah. And just to kind of say, in terms of solutions and ways to start changing that, I think for me, this is something I'm working on at the moment personally, but like one of the main things that I'm trying to do at the moment is really make sure that I'm not looking at my phone for the first at least half an hour of my day. If I can extend that to an hour, just make sure that I'm getting up slowly, that I'm, taking my time and only having coffee after a certain time. So like not within the first hour of waking up, because we need the body to just slowly wake up and create the hormones. I actually don't know what they are exactly, but just like naturally wake up rather than like blasting it with caffeine. And then with also dopamine, which we're getting from looking at the phone, which we become really, really addicted to if we're doing that constantly.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just I think if you're starting the day looking at emails and social media and coffee, this is a recipe for yeah, just being knackered and not feeling too good a little bit later on. And just to kind of something else came in about your riff just now in terms of the more people are in this stress paradigm, the more we're like kind of like cut off from the feeling, and therefore the more cut off we are from the messages from the body that something is happening. So, the more in the stress we are, the less able we are to listen to the body, and the body is always giving us signals. So, I've spoken to many people who they're just running on cortisol, running on fight or flight, and then they stop to rest, and suddenly this huge wave of tiredness. And when I say stop to rest, I'm talking about some sort of intentional rest, maybe go into like a retreat over a weekend, or
Mm.
go into a spa, or go into just something where they can get a meaningful deplug from their lives, or like a bodywork session, or something like that. And suddenly, whoomph, this deep, deep tiredness suddenly is there, where they've gone from to
Yeah.
like I feel like I could sleep for days. And you know what, and what's happening is the retreat or the bodywork session or whatever it is relaxing them enough to bring them out of fight or flight, to actually get them connected to the messages that the body is trying to send them all the time, but that they're nullifying through coffee or overworking or stimuli. And then it's just like, oh, actually my body is feeling so damn tired, but I didn't recognize it before because they were like divorced from the feeling, and they're thinking. Actually, you were telling me a story about one of your clients. Actually, I think that something similar was happening. Or you'll tell it better than me, but is it something like that? They through a session they were actually able to see how tired they actually were.
Mhm.
Was that right? Or
Yeah, so through one of in the session, the client realized that she was really exhausted. And this is someone that suffers with chronic fatigue. So, this is not an abnormal thing. But even with the knowledge that they had chronic fatigue, didn't realize how tired they were. And then in the session was able to tune into the body, and she actually fell asleep in the session. Um, Yeah, she fell asleep and I kind of let her sleep for about 10 or so minutes and then the session was ending. So I kind of brought her out. But I think even that 10-minute rest, being intentional rest, just like letting herself just like fully kind of let just dive into whatever was present and how tired she was. She woke up feeling, really rested and really relieved that she'd actually just started to listen to how tired she was.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah, beautiful. Maybe it's potentially creating like a portal of possibility for the person to recognize, oh, maybe I need to take more rest. And yeah, I find this can happen in a bodywork session as well. Towards the end, they kind of fall asleep, and it's just like, oh, you know what, I'll leave them for 10, 15 because I know how, that's needed. If someone's falling asleep in a session, that's probably a person who's like going to benefit from resting to a deeper level.
Yeah, and just to quickly add as well, just around like the body messages and body messages, they can come in different ways. It can be like messages about your needs. So, I'm hungry, I need to go to the bathroom. And then there's also like more and more subtle needs. I need to rest. That's for some people slightly more subtle. And then there's also like intuition hits, and I help people start to kind of listen to intuition. Some people call it instinct. They're similar. It's like messages of what we need to kind of I suppose like that deeper part of self, knowing what we need to do to feel better or to have a more fulfilled life, for example. And some of these intuition messages, they get turned off, I find, that if we don't listen to them. So the messages will come through, they'll come through, and then eventually, if we're not listening, they stop happening altogether or become really, really, really quiet. And actually, once we start listening to them, I get a lot of people tell me like, "Oh yeah, this is loud now." I get these like loud messages, um, and so yeah, I just wanted to add that into like the body intuition cues. There's sort of different levels to them.
Yeah, but puts me in mind a little bit of like training the muscle. It's kind of there's the saying like use it or lose it. So kind of like training the muscle of the intuition, and
Mm.
to use it, the more it's likely to come in to be able to help us. So cool. All right. So I'd love to. This has been brilliant conversation. We could talk about it for hours, but
Yeah.
no doubt. Um, I want to just switch gears a little bit and just say or ask. I know you work a lot with health and wellness practitioners and people who are usually already quite grounded into their self development journey. So yeah, I just want to ask like how might someone know if somatic coaches for them for where they are in their journeys, and what kind of people do you work with? I know you tend to work with a lot of people in like leadership roles, but yeah, is there anyone else that you work with, and yeah, at what stage can someone benefit from somatic coaching?
Okay, so first off, I would say everyone in the world, I really believe this. This isn't just me selling my work. I really believe everyone could benefit from somatic coaching. It's so beautiful. Specifically, I love to work with people who are um, in their healing journey further along in the sense of like they are already connected to their body, they're already hearing those messages, because it's the transformation, the shifts are so quick. It's so beautiful to witness kind of how quickly someone can start making really, really big changes in their lives. I think I would say, I do like still working with people who are quite disassociated from their bodies, because it's an interesting journey kind of getting more into the body and listening to that. But I would say that does take time, whereas people who are further along, who are already connected to the intuition, already connected to the body, the transformation, the changes are really quick. And so working with people more in leadership roles is great. And specifically I like working with people who are in leadership and they're kind of slightly more on kind of what we would call the masculine side. So, maybe in the hustle and grind culture, maybe they've started to realize that's what they're doing and they don't want to do that anymore. And so they've sort of started slowing down a little bit and understanding that actually through slowing down they can get a lot. more done, like rest. You were telling me this actually recently, right? Just like speaking about training and rest and how important rest is when you're training, that you will actually be able to show up in training and train way harder, way better than if you are like pushing, and then eventually you just like kind of burn out, right? And so uh people working in those leadership roles that are realizing that they're needing more rest and they're more effective when they rest more, and that are wanting to connect more to their vulnerability. That's my superpower, I would say, is vulnerability. It's something that's always come naturally to me. I don't know how to not be vulnerable, which has led in different ways to oversharing at times. And now I'm trying to figure out like the balance. But you know, it's something that I value a lot, like being really honest, vulnerable. And I think those qualities are things that are really important to being a leader, a really good leader. I think we're really needing leaders in our world that are able to connect to their human side, basically, you know, not just disconnect and be the leader and then not also be the human who has needs, who has emotion, who has all these different things. It's actually about, you know, as I said with the somatic coaching, like bringing all the parts of the self into who we're showing up as in the world. And so I really like working with people who are ready to take that journey of having more vulnerability in a public way, which is not easy, but it's really powerful once they do.
Mhm. Yeah, I can really, really relate to that. Of having gone on a journey with my own expression of vulnerability and going from a place of just like total armoring of just like, no, can't show weakness or put weakness, quote unquote, at any cost. And actually, that actually being a massive weakness in of itself, because you know, if we're forever living behind the armor and never able to express, that's going to create problems. And it created problems for me until I was able to actually move into that space of vulnerability. And, you know, the transformation that came on the other side of that was really quite profound and benefited me like massively, massively. So, I mean, what could you, because I mean I think we have this very negative view of vulnerability and inherently
Mm.
can it be negative where just about everything in our life is a double-edged sword, so there must be another side to it. And I think most people are going to have like a negative coloring of vulnerability, and I know that I definitely did until I moved into it. I was like, oh my god, this stuff is amazing. But it's not like this stuff. It was just like, no, I was like being vulnerable and enjoying the fruits that came from that. So, what could you say to um, how could you open up vulnerability in a different way to say someone who may have a negative perception of it? And just one last shares is that I've gone from having a negative perception of vulnerability to actually having an overwhelmingly positive perception of being in that vulnerable space. So, what can you share with someone who is maybe kind of in the space of just like can't be vulnerable, or maybe recognizes that actually being vulnerable may be beneficial, but doesn't know how?
Mm.
Yeah.
I'd love before I answer that question to hear like what your perspective used to be on vulnerability, because I can't even picture vulnerability being seen as a negative thing, so I need your help here.
Sure. So, from my personal perspective, I kind of used to feel that I need to be, as the coach in this space of working with people, I need to be like impervious and be in this like kind of, I don't want to say perfect place, but it's just that I felt like I needed to be in a certain place to be able to be that model for others.
Mm.
So when I naturally went through challenges, because I'm a human, just like everyone else, you know, you can be like, you know, as developed as you want, but you know, say if a family member dies, or you have like a really extreme health challenge come up, or you know, you break your leg, or something in life happens, you know, you're gonna go through challenges, you're gonna go through difficulty, and you know, you to project this mask of like everything is all right when it's not, you know, it creates this gap, and you know, this gap is a gap of authentic expression and authenticity. So I used to kind of really be with that mask when things weren't all right, and I got really good at it in terms of like I guess being able to disassociate from what was happening in my life in order to maintain that kind of public front.
Right.
Because I believe that if I did kind of move into that space of vulnerability, people wouldn't respect what I was doing, or would kind of think that I was a fraud, like because I was supposed to be this like health and wellness like model, where in actual fact it's just like it's kind of, you could say, being like more of a fraud, actually not expressing that vulnerability, but like kind of having all of these and like another piece to it is having all of these this protective armoring in the way of it as well, because once upon a time I will have learned in several instances that actually to be in a space of vulnerability is to be open for attack. So there's definitely was like a strong protective piece in not showing vulnerability, and I think like men as well have lots of very unhelpful ideas put to them, like all that boys don't cry bullshit, and you can't express emotion because that's what the girls do, and blah blah blah, all of
Yeah.
that crap that were fed as boys often, and so I think it's a really widespread problem with men, and we see male suicide at an all-time high. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of like a little bit around kind of my protection against being vulnerable.
Yeah. Yeah, this makes a lot of sense. So I suppose what I want to say with that you've spoken a little bit about that journey already. And so, what I'm hearing is the realization that actually when we are more vulnerable in public, I think we can help people a lot more because we're showing them the reality of things rather than like a perfected image of um what things like what we think things should look like. And I think that's the world that we're going into, from a world of like maybe like more celebrities that we were only seeing the one very very small aspect of them. We're kind of going more now into like influencers where we're seeing the whole of their lives. I think people are more and more interested in seeing that like the whole of the picture, including the parts that aren't so pretty, that aren't so picture perfect. So I think it makes sense that it's a struggle because we're going from one paradigm to another, and it's not an easy, it's sort of a weird tension, uh but I'm really seeing this like perfectionism, and when we're asking ourselves to be perfect, to look perfect, then we're leaving part of ourselves out of the equation, and that's the disassociation. And I think disassociation creates a lot of problems in the self. And so, in terms of leaning into that vulnerability and being that leader that's able to maybe cry in public, or, just show the journey that's going on, show the different challenges as well. Uh, Again, I think that's really, really helpful for people to see someone going through those challenges, because it can also, I think, inspire and allow themselves to see themselves as a leader as well. Being Because I think often we think, oh, I can't become a leader, I'm not perfect yet, and there's always this idea of like I can't do it because I'm not perfect, um and I haven't, I'm not far enough on my journey. And I think I really want to encourage more and more people to step up in their imperfection, and wherever they're at. And in order to do that, we have to be able to be vulnerable with ourselves. And I think that's the first step to being vulnerable in public and in front of others. It's like first we have to be able to look at it and look at our own sensations, our own feelings, our own challenges dead in the face. um and transform those, start to see that by looking at the fears, by looking at the difficult things, they start to move, and they're not so scary. um So I would say that that would be my number one recommendation is to start looking at things uh, first in a personal setting, in a private setting. And the more we get comfortable with doing that regularly, then the more we'll be able to take that into a more public sphere. And I will just say that, for myself as well, it's definitely been like it's a journey now of so as someone who's always been able to be vulnerable now I'm more and more seeing myself as being able to be a leader because I'm vulnerable, because I'm so proficient with my own feelings. I'm like, oh yeah, that actually means I can step up as a leader and lead people from that place and create connection rather than like that then divide between like, oh, I'm the leader, you're the leaded, I guess. Or the follower, I suppose. It's more just like, oh, we're just you know, connected in some way, and here are ways that I'm showing up that uh, maybe you're kind of not doing, and maybe you can do better. And what are ways that you're showing up that I can do better, and just helping each other. So basically, creating circles and not pyramids, not like a I'm better than you. Let me show you the way. It's like let's do this together.
There's so much power in that. It's like power of vulnerability, power of like resting into the feminine, power of like just being open and authentic. I just want to share like something interesting happened for me just as you started talking. I completely disassociated from what you're saying for about a minute. I just didn't hear because I went into process because of the vulnerable share. And it was really interesting. Is like I felt in my body, it's just like this, like heart dropping,
Mm.
just and it's just like this feeling of like you're exposed because it was all good when I was talking to you. I'm very used to talking to you about like different things, but then after I finished talking, it's just like, oh shit, this is gonna be on a podcast where everyone's like, oh, they're all gonna know, da, 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 da. And it was just this really kind of interesting process that I witnessed like in my body, and like I said, this dropping of the heart, but actually. I then realized, oh, you've completely not heard what Charlie said for the last minute because you've been in process. Right, okay, let's give myself the soothing to kind of bring myself back to that space and then reconnect with the conversation. But so I was unable to like listen to what you're saying, but then that heart sensation carried on going until I started talking about, as in doing now, and now actually through talking about and voicing it, which is what I found is like so powerful within our dynamic in terms of me being able to express that heart feeling is completely gone now, and I'm kind of feeling like in my empowerment again.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
that maybe that's helpful for the listeners to hear as well.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. That's so beautiful, number one, vulnerable, number two, and just incredible that you're able to voice that and that you're in a part of your journey that like that's you can do that basically. I think that even being able to recognize it and recognize that that's happening, and just to say also, just to be able to differentiate the fact that like that voice is saying that, and you're like, oh, but that voice isn't me, because sometimes when we get thoughts, we forget like we're not our thoughts, and sometimes thoughts come in that are like I guess, then there may be societal things, there are voices from other people, like expectations or different things. So it's really helpful to kind of remember, like, oh yeah, not everything, not all information that comes from the mind needs to be listened to. And learning to make that distinction is really powerful. And I think somatic coaching is really, really helpful for that. And to also be able to recognize the sensations, voice them, and through voicing them, shifting them.
Mm.
So thanks for sharing.
Thank you for being holding the space for so that I feel comfortable to share in that way.
Mhm.
So yeah, it really puts across to me the medicine that just comes from holding space, and you hold the space like really beautifully
Yeah,
to
thank you.
things to come through. So, oh damn, this has been so juicy. We're kind of want to come to the end a little bit because, but
Mm.
we could talk. This podcast could go on for 4 hours, I'm sure. But I've got like a few just a few closing things as we wrap up, and I want to ask, like, so we've given like lots of context and lots of information around like somatic healing, and I'm wondering if you could recommend any somatic, like a somatic practice for the listeners, if they want to, they're thinking, right, I've listened to all this stuff. Connection to my body is like damn important, but how can I start that process? So yeah, could you recommend a practice at all?
Yes, definitely. I think I want to recognize the I want to recommend the practice that you just did, Jess. When it comes to something that feels a little bit edgy that we do. And it's like about like trying to recognize the sensations of what's going on. So when we're sort of feeling a little bit like what's going on and going into maybe a stress response or whatever it is, trying to recognize what's happening, maybe allow it, maybe voice it, and kind of notice the shifts in sensations. So just as you did, you noticed, oh, like my heart is feeling a certain way, my heart is sinking because I've just said this, and you know, so trying to recognize that, maybe breathe into it. That's helpful. Breath is super, super helpful. Witness it happening. If we can, if we're in a space where we can do that, maybe voice it. But if not, just witness it in ourselves, in our head, potentially just be, saying something like, oh, like it's okay, um or like this is happening, like just voicing in your head, oh, I'm feeling this way, this is interesting, um and then maybe trying to nurture that, and so I've kind of mapped out the rain, which is recognize, allow, investigate. Maybe investigate would be like ask a question, maybe ask yourself like, why is this happening? What part of me is feeling this way? And then the last part would be nurture, just create, like maybe it's just sending yourself some love, um, for what's just happened. And this particular practice, rain, comes from Tara Brach, who's a Buddhist practitioner, who does kind of meditations and stuff. There are rain practices that you can find on YouTube, which are really beautiful. It's like little meditations. I think it's a really, really great start into being more aware of what's happening in the sensations and somatics in general.
Wonderful, thank you. What just came up there is just how beautiful rain can be, and I think it can be such a beautiful thing to express these other sides of ourselves, our other emotions, like going deep into that sadness, into that grief. There's a lot of beauty there potentially. So yeah, it's a lot of beauty and transformation that we had, I'm sure, from really delving into ourselves and tapping into that well. Um,
Mm.
Awesome. So we've got a free webinar coming up called Body Talks, and this is me and Charlie are going to team up to deliver some really, really great material to anyone who fancies joining. I think if you're listening to the podcast this far, then this webinar is definitely going to be for you. For sure. I'd love to ask Charlie, what is Body Talks all about, and who is it for?
Yeah, so as we mentioned on this podcast, the body's communicating with us in many different ways. So this is why the webinar is called Body Talks. The body talks with us. And the question is, how do we listen? How do we learn to listen? And so I'm a somatic coach. I work with more kind of the body like inside, how we feel inside, and Jess works more with the body, like I guess on the outside, how it feels like on the outside. And specifically in this webinar, we're going to talk about how the two are super connected, how the emotional states really influence the body, and how the body influences the emotional states, and how we can liberate ourselves from potentially emotional holding patterns, ways that the body has learned to form itself in a way that I'm mumbling my words a little bit. Can you help me out, Jess?
Yeah. So the emotional holding patterns. This is yes, very much my my wheelhouse here, like in terms of like it's basically the juicy link between how our emotional temperaments that we're practicing throughout our lives are ultimately expressed through our posture and body. So the body is an imprint of the psyche. So within the webinar, we're gonna part of what we're going to be going through is talking about how those emotional states can and do lead to postural issues and pain issues. So a direct correlation between the emotions that we're I was about to say feeling, but it's usually not feeling because we suppress and repress these emotions, which is where your work is so powerful to bring these emotions to the floor. So I kind of will like help to unwind the body through body work and manual therapy, whilst you're able to help the person uncap those repressed emotions. And yeah, we're going to be understanding the juicy link between how the emotions are influencing our health on a day-to-day basis, and give you guys some really, really great ways in which you can start to unwind this and start your emotional healing journey through the body and the mind.
Yeah, and just to kind of say, part of the reason that we've decided to team up is through meeting. Me and Jess have realized like, oh, like our work is really symbiotic. And so I've received some of your sessions and they've been amazing. Firstly, because you're an amazing body worker, but I think also partly because of the work that I've done as a somatic coach with my own emotions, so that like the kind of emotional release that I was able to have through the body work that you were giving me was super powerful, and I was able to hold myself and let go of a lot of um, emotions and things that I was holding on to. And it's been incredibly transformational for me. I've noticed in a very short time a huge transformation, and so I think both of our works being combined and working together, I think can really offer huge, huge, huge and fast transformation for people who are looking for that.
Yeah, so we're basically going to be giving lots of juicy information and lots of really great practices that you can take away and start practicing yourselves. And it is interesting because we're coming from different angles with it. Like I've done tons of work on the physical and like an amount on the emotional, but not as much as you had. And you done tons on the emotional, but not so much on the physical. So for you, the really potent medicine was working with the physical, and for me, the really potent medicine was working with the emotional. So it's interesting because yeah, we're kind of coming from our opposite ends of the spectrum, and yeah, so really nice segue into my last question, and it is a question of transformation. So Phoenix Vision is dedicated to creating a transformative vision of health for its listeners. So my question is, what does transformation mean to you, and what would you like to transform in the future?
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, what a beautiful question. So, I lead people to transform their limitations into liberation. So we all have limitations that have been imposed on us by society, that have been imposed by our conditions in different ways, whether it's through the body, the mind, whatever it is. I believe all of those things we are holding on to. And as we are able to look at them, we can then release them. So I say to people that I help them get rid of their stuff. So the stuff is the stories, the traumas, the unconscious fears and feelings. So everything that's kind of in the body, but maybe somehow a little bit unconscious, we bring it to your attention, we become aware of it, and then through releasing it, we get super liberated. And liberation to me means like feeling really embodied, and embodied means like feeling good in the body, feeling like lots of pleasure, feeling really confident and happy, energetic, feeling fulfilled. And so I love the idea of bringing people towards a personal liberation of themselves so then they can start liberating the lives of people around them. So through being more authentic and living the life that they want to live, I think that each of us individually can inspire people around us to do the same. And so I believe that the individual can liberate and transform the collective.
Powerful, powerful stuff. Yeah, that's fantastic. Oh, thank you, Charlie. Wow, this has been a powerful episode. Yeah, interviewing a powerful woman. So yeah, thank you so much for your time. How can people find out more about you, Pantiera Healing, and some of the work you do if they're interested in finding out more?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram. I'm Pantera Healing, so it's Pan Pan and then Tierra Tierra. So you can find me on Instagram. On my Instagram, there's also a link to my website, which is just panterahealing.com. I think I forgot to say the Instagram is Pantera and then healing. It will be linked in the show notes anyway, so you can find me there. Find me on Instagram. There's a link to my website. DM me, start a conversation. I love talking to people. There we go.
Awesome. I'll also link the our webinar Body Talks into the show notes as well. And one last shout out. We've also started a community called the Nourish Tribe. So it's all about helping people with their self nourishment because we've both gone on our nourishment journeys, and it's a really core um, key integral part of like what we've developed for ourselves and what we now want to share with other people. So if you're interested in joining our WhatsApp group, the Nourish Tribe, then that will be in the notes as well. And we're going to be doing lots of different things. We've got a little event coming up in September, and we've got our webinar as well as lots of fun things coming up. So yeah, join for nourishment.
Yeah.
So, Charlie, thank you so much. This has been like really, really great episode. It's just, yeah, like wow, like I've learned a lot, and yeah, thank you for your energy and your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jess.
Lots of
Lots of
love.
love.